Cajun Country, the Louisiana wetlands, the Bayou. Whatever you want to call it, this region is not at all what I expected. When I thought of the Louisiana wetlands, I always pictured people with shotguns, living in shacks on the side of a dark, overgrown swamp. While those homes may exist down there somewhere, what I experienced in some of the southernmost parts of Louisiana, in a region where there is seemingly more water than land, were just a bunch of hard-working blue-collar people, many of which are in the seafood, boating, oil, and gas industries. It's an area ravaged by hurricanes, winds, and flooding, from which there is obviously a lot of structural damage. However, it seems like most of the attention that this region receives now is in relation to some sort of bad news. I'm here to say that this area is certainly alive and well, not without its struggles, but there is a unique feel and culture here that I have not seen duplicated anywhere else in the country. For this video, I'm actually covering 3 different towns, starting with the little town of Chauvin. With a population of just over 2,500 people, Chauvin's livelihood really does focus on the water. Chauvin was named after Albert Chauvin, who was an early entrepreneur of this area, establishing a general store here in 1875, catering to the needs of fishermen in this little bayou community. Although there are lots of little roads in the area, there is pretty much only one road that takes you through town, following alongside the Bayou Petit Caillou. There's more here than meets the eye, though. After driving through, I didn't even realize that I had driven by a Piggly Wiggly grocery store, a drugstore, and a pizza shop. These businesses blend right in, and they just pop up randomly in the middle of residential areas. There really isn't one commercial center for the town, it's just all spread out instead. One of the things I noticed right away about the housing in this area is that the majority of homes are built up on stilts. Now, this is not the first time I've experienced this, having lived in the Carolinas before. However, seeing mobile homes up on stilts is a rather odd-looking sight to see. The need to be elevated, though, is clearly apparent, as the roadways are barely above the waterline on a good day, so I can imagine how bad this area gets when the weather is bad. There's not much for tourists to do here in Chauvin outside of finding someone to take you out on a boat, of which you absolutely can do, and I'm sure that the locals could also clue me in on other land-based things to see in the area too. However, there is one site to see in Chauvin, a folk art concrete sculpture garden simply called the Chauvin Sculpture Park. This little park was created by artist Kenny Hill. Mr. Hill was a bricklayer by trade, born around 1950. He began creating these sculptures in 1990 and ending around 2000, creating his vision of the world around him. There are more than 100 sculptures here, mainly religious subjects of varying forms. Many of the sculptures feature self-depictions of Hill himself, showing his heart bleeding, riding a horse, carrying the cross of Christ, in general showing the pain that he felt throughout his lifetime. When asked about his vision for his art, his only response was, "It's about living in life and everything I've learned." Hill left town on foot after being evicted for having an overgrown property, knocking the head off of his own statue of Christ before leaving. Today, the property is operated by the Nichols State University Art Studio. A little farther south, still within the zip code for Chauvin, is the little community of Cocodrie, which is where the road literally ends for this part of the Cajun Bayou on Highway 56. There are other points in the state farther south, over to the east, including Grand Isle, but there aren't many road-accessible locations more southern than this. Cocodrie is Louisiana French for alligator. Unfortunately, or maybe I should say fortunately, I did not see any alligators during my visit down here. I did, however, see lots of boats, which, unsurprisingly, is what keeps this area going. Between the fishing boats and the vessels headed out to the energy companies, there is not much else to see here. The majority of homes are up on pilings. The state of properties here ranges from completely destroyed to very elaborate, sometimes side by side. The reason I drove down here, though, wasn't to see more of the same that I saw up in Chauvin, but rather because of the Louisiana University's Marine Consortium, locally referred to as Lumcon. Lumcon has a publicly accessible space that I would best describe as a small interpretive center. It has aquariums with local species of fish and sea life, examples of local geology, and a viewing tower that you can climb up into. Once in the viewing tower, there are displays about the area, including the people, the culture, and of course a lot about the natural area, the waterways, and the creatures living in them. The only person I saw while here was a security guard who wasn't the friendliest person I ever met. The view from the top of the tower was worth the visit, and I was able to see quite a ways out into the waterways of southern Louisiana. Back down on ground level, they also have a little boardwalk that goes around a small pond out front of their building, with a few informational signs along the way. I wouldn't go out of my way to visit Lumcon. However, it is a stop I certainly don't regret making since I was already in the area, and it's free to enter. I then snaked my way up through the swamps on Highway 57 to Dulac, my final stop on this little loop of the Louisiana Bayou. Just like the other two communities I stopped in, Dulac is primarily a fishing and shrimping-based community. However, there is one major distinction that sets Dulac apart, which is that there is a small Coast Guard station here on the site of a former plantation. The live oaks surrounding the Coast Guard station are original to that plantation, formerly owned by the governor of Mississippi from many, many years ago. Like Chauvin, Dulac is a strange mix of residential homes interspersed with a random business here and there. Nothing very big. In fact, I would say the biggest commercial establishment in town is probably the hardware store or the Dollar General, both beside each other. Now, while I was in Dulac, it was lunchtime, and if you've subscribed to my channel and seen my other videos, I'm sure it doesn't shock you that I was looking for some good food from a local restaurant. Holy cow, I was not disappointed. I cannot recommend Ceana's Cajun Cookin highly enough. The food here was incredible. I had a butter burger and a small order of onion rings. I watched them make the onion rings from scratch and throw them into the fryer. I certainly would not call that a small order, but apparently that's how they roll here in Dulac. After a full morning of exploration, it was time for me to head onward to my next stop on my tour of Ceana and southern Louisiana. We'll see you next time somewhere else down the road.